By the year 1922, the world had officially moved beyond World War I. The cannons were silent, the trenches abandoned, and peace treaties firmly in place. To many, the war belonged to the past. But for those who had lived through it, the Great War was not over. It had simply changed its form. 1922 was not a year of battles. It was a year of ghosts. Across Europe, the land still carried the scars of destruction. In France and Belgium, shattered villages stood half rebuilt. Their broken walls reminders of artillery fire that had ended years earlier. Fields once filled with crops were still dangerous, hiding unexploded shells beneath the soil. Farmers worked slowly, knowing that death could still rise from the ground without warning. The war had ended, but the earth remembered. For millions of former soldiers, 1922 was a year of quiet suffering. These men had survived trench warfare, poison gas, and relentless bombardment. They had endured mud, hunger, fear, and the constant presence of death. Now, in peace, they were expected to live normal lives again. Many could not. Nightmares followed them into sleep. Sudden noises brought back memories of explosions. Silence felt uncomfortable after years of chaos. What we now call post-traumatic stress was barely understood. Veterans were told to be strong, to forget, to move on. Jobs were scarce. Wounded soldiers struggled to work. Some begged on city streets wearing medals that once symbolized honor, but now drew little attention. Governments held ceremonies and speeches, but daily life remained difficult. In Britain, war memorials had become part of the landscape by 1922. Almost every town and village had one. Stone monuments listed hundreds of names, sometimes entire generations lost. People passed them every day on the way to work, to church, to school. Grief had become permanent, woven into everyday life. Families were still incomplete. Widows raised children alone, surviving on small pensions that barely covered food and rent. Mothers who had lost sons lived with silent pain, their hopes buried alongside their children. Children grew up knowing their fathers only through photographs and stories, shaped by absence rather than presence. Germany in 1922 faced a deepening crisis. The defeat of World War I and the Treaty of Versailles weighed heavily on the nation. Reparations payments strained the economy. Inflation accelerated rapidly. Money lost value almost daily. Workers were paid in stacks of banknotes that could barely buy bread. Hunger and anger spread across cities and towns. Former soldiers trained for war, but unprepared for peace, felt humiliated and betrayed. Many believed Germany had been wronged rather than defeated. Extremist political movements gained strength by promising pride, revenge, and change. The war had not ended for Germany. It had transformed into resentment. France, though victorious, was far from secure. Large parts of the country were still rebuilding. Railways, factories, and homes had to be reconstructed from ruins. Veterans with missing limbs and damaged lungs filled hospitals and streets. Victory felt hollow when nearly every family had suffered loss. French leaders focused on security, fearing another German invasion. Trust between nations was fragile. Peace existed, but it was tense and uncertain, built on fear rather than reconciliation. Beyond Western Europe, the world remained unstable. The collapse of empires during World War I had created new nations, but their borders were fragile and contested. Ethnic tensions simmered across Eastern Europe and the Balkans. Civil wars and revolutions continued in some regions, proving that the violence of the Great War had not truly ended. In 1922, diplomacy attempted to heal what war had broken. International conferences were held. Leaders spoke of cooperation and stability. The League of Nations continued its mission to prevent future wars. Many hoped it would succeed. Others doubted its power to stop another catastrophe. The mood of the world was cautious, uncertain, and tired. Culture reflected this reality. Writers, poets, and artists who had survived the war rejected old ideas of glory and heroism. Their works described despair, loss, and disillusionment. War was no longer romantic. It was industrial, cruel, and meaningless. This shift in thinking shaped an entire generation. People questioned authority, tradition, and nationalism. Faith in progress had been damaged. The world of 1922 was older, wiser, and more fragile than the one that had existed before 1914, yet life continued. Cities slowly regained their rhythm, cafes filled again. Music and cinema offered escape from painful memories. Children were born who had never heard artillery fire. Humanity showed its ability to endure even after unimaginable suffering. Veterans found comfort in one another. They formed organizations, shared memories, and honored fallen comrades together. Among themselves, there was understanding. No explanations were needed. 1922 stood at a critical point in history. The world could choose healing, cooperation, and forgiveness, or allow anger and fear to grow unchecked. The lessons of World War I were clear, written in blood and ruins. The question was whether humanity would listen. History would later provide its answer.